am absolutely delighted to invite our next guest onto the stage. Sean is a talent transformation leader. He has had an absolutely incredible career. He's someone who hasn't just shaped strategies at scale, but he's lived them and has deep expertise in leading through change. He recently led a $7.5 billion business of public sector at Deloitte. And in case you're interested in oyster farming, he farms oysters, so grab him later if you want any tips. But please join me in welcoming to the stage Sean Morris. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Sharing your perspectives and the partnership we've had. Let's start by you just sharing a little bit about your role and how it connects to the people side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start by saying thank you to all of you for bringing us to such a fantastic place. It may not sound like it, but I'm actually from Los Angeles. And it looked just like this where I lived, by the way, except for the sea view and beautiful smells and everything. The reason I say this, though, is we're working through some really meaty topics over the next day and a half. And I can't think of a better place to sort of relax and contemplate those topics than the place you guys have chosen here. So it's a wonderful, wonderful location. So my current role in the firm, and I've been very blessed at Deloitte. I've had a whole bunch of different roles, both client-facing as well as operational. And my current role is to lead our talent transformation for the firm. I've been doing this for about 2 years now. It's a 4 to 5 year journey for us. Not surprisingly, we're in the professional services market. Talent is our key asset at the end of the day. And so we are completely rethinking what it means to serve that talent from a functional perspective all the way through to the core technologies and really sort of challenging the orthodoxies of the last 175 years that Deloitte's been around.
Yeah. And Ashu obviously talked a lot about agentic AI. You're in front of clients a lot as well. I'm curious how it's coming up in client conversations, but then internally as well, and how you see the implications of talent.
Yeah, I'd say 75% of the time we're having those conversations with client. There's still about a third of our client base that have taken a step back and they are contemplating this either at the board level or on the ground. But the vast majority are in some form of a conversation around this, either piloting different aspects of AI, primarily generative, building off of their journeys around automation in general over the last couple of years. And they are, with our help in many instances, starting to think about where they want to be on the maturity curve. We are nerdy consultants at the end of the day in Deloitte, and so we have frameworks that help us think through, and our clients think through lots of different problems. And we have a framework around maturity for AI that goes from 1, which is basically, I'm not really in that space, to 5, which is I am on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of the curve. So we help them through that maturity, and then think through how do you take bite-sized pilots to start transforming key aspects, typically large pieces of human intervention in a particular process. Think about recruiting as an example, and run a pilot and then see what results they get from that and then sort of move forward. We prefer and we recommend that approach because you can build trust, which I think is really, really important in the system with the clients. And most importantly, they can build trust with the humans in their organization to recognize that this is actually the future and it's going to lead us in a positive direction.
Right. And especially when you're thinking about an HR and a people function, it gets to a next level. How are you seeing agentic AI play a role in the HR and people function today?
Yeah. Well, firstly, lots of different places across the talent lifecycle, by the way. The first thing, though, that we did is we said, we're going to create a community within our own talent organization, and we're going to allow and ask and encourage our talent professionals, and we have about 5,000 in Deloitte, by the way, that run the entire life cycle of our talent, to actually be hands-on with the tools and see what they can do and share those results with each other and beyond. And that has created a level of trust that I think we can build off of from a foundational perspective. And then we're taking on the real meaty topics around recruiting or deployment. Deployment's really important to us, and you can think of it outside of the four walls of Deloitte as the mobility of your people. For us, it's super important to make sure that we don't just move people quickly from one client engagement to another, but that we get it right on a more common basis. And when humans are the only aspect that are involved in making those decisions, you don't always get it right, in which that causes some friction in the system, either on the client side or internal to Deloitte, or most importantly, from a talent experience side. So we see this running all the way down the talent lifecycle. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in the business, because the speed with which we're seeing this evolve is both scary and exciting at the same time, hence the need for a framework or two here and there.
I love that. Now, every organization is trying to make this jump, but it comes to how, right? What do you see as the key consideration factors in terms of really driving that adoption and value? You mentioned piloting and getting the buy-in. Are there other areas that you would share?
Yeah, look, I think when you think about those pilots, when you think about moving up that maturity, I always encourage our clients, and we're sort of eating our own dog food here, in how you measure success is incredibly important. And many of us want to measure in terms of quantitative factors, right? It's easy. We all like math. Many of us are very analytical. Everybody loves the cost saving. I'm going to strongly recommend that we look at the balance of that with qualitative factors as well. And so talent experience, I'm going to be human capitalist just for a moment here. Talent experience, super important, right? Do you have an engaged workforce that trusts in the system? Very, very important. There's different aspects that you can measure on from that. The other piece that we are pushing on in a really, really major way is, how do you actually provide agency to your workforce so that they're not being spoon-fed? We may nudge occasionally, but that agency becomes a really important piece of how you measure success as well. And so I think that's an incredibly important piece of this. Getting that right from the very beginning allows you to stay the journey through the twists and turns that inevitably you'll have.
And, Deloitte obviously has their workforce trends report. I'm just curious, and we had last year actually someone present those trends. What's coming up now in that trends report, specifically as it relates to AI and skills that you see?
The good news is I'm not going to be presenting it today, but I have team members in the audience that I believe are presenting it tomorrow. It is really the sort of absorption of AI at the end of the day is a core aspect of that, and so are skills, funnily enough, which is why we're here today.
Exactly.
So two really meaty topics that I actually think feed off of each other, which means you got to get both sides of that equation right.
Yeah. And how are you thinking about shaping your own workforce, especially in light of not just the macro environment and the implications to the Deloitte employees serving these clients? It's the AI innovation as well as the changing talent trends. How are you taking the lead in terms of shaping that actual workforce today?
So we're interested in an agility, right? So change is omnipresent. I believe it's always been omnipresent. It's the speed with which we're having to react in particular markets, whether that's on the regulated side of the business or the unregulated side of the business. And so we are very, very focused on getting talent architecture correct in Deloitte, which is a major focus for us, and it'll be one of the key deliverables on this 4 or 5 year journey that I referenced earlier. And then getting the agentic AI piece of this correct, I think is super important to us, building the trust so that people see the value in that. And then for me, the special sauce, the fuel, the currency is going to be the skills. Getting that correct and having our people recognize they have some agency here that they can use, they can see, and they can drive through different aspects of their career journey at Deloitte.
Yeah. And obviously, we're honored that Eightfold is part of that picture. I'm just curious where you see Eightfold play a role as part of that transformation.
It's a partner, right? At the end of the day, you're a great partner. We obviously are an integrator of Eightfold for both our commercial clients and our government clients. We went out and did our homework. We obviously talked to our teams, who, by the way, we do have integrator teams here today. I encourage you all to reach out to them over a drink to hear their experiences. But we actually went out and we had conversations with them about their experiences with Eightfold. We went to a couple of, I don't know if you know this, but we went to a couple of our competitors who are a little bit ahead of us in working with you. And people were very, very complimentary about how you partner. And I will say, we spent some time together at your offices in Northern California at the beginning of this year. I could see that play out. The agility that you all have, the speed with which you clearly can move, was very reassuring to me. And many of your competitors, I don't see that. And so you are still moving at the speed of a startup, but have a lot more capability behind you. And we want that as a partner in a structure that is as complicated as Deloitte.
Yeah, we love to hear that. Thank you, Sean. And how are you going to be measuring the value that you're delivering to the business as part of this skills-based transformation?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the use case. So first and foremost, balanced, like I said before, right? Quantitative and qualitative. Let's think about it from the deployment use case. So if we can position the right skilled individuals into a role, let's say a day earlier, that has a meaningful impact on our bottom line because our bench is smaller. We will absolutely reduce the level of turnover. And those types of things. That's a qualitative piece to it. But making sure that the individual that's moving from one engagement to the other can see their professional journey moving up and to the right, can see the skills that they are, actually literally see the skills that they are gaining as a result of that positioning, that correct positioning, is on the qualitative side of the house. And so we definitely look at it that way. The other one that I would add is learning and development is fascinating.
Yeah.
So we, I believe, have a world-class learning and development group. We have a fantastic facility in Dallas called Deloitte University where we do a lot of our training. We have an incredibly extensive capability from an L&D perspective. But I think it's kind of complicated. And when you come into Deloitte, you're overwhelmed by the amount of learning that's out there. And so we see this as an opportunity to nudge and direct people to the right levels of learning and maybe reduce some of the learning platform that we have that maybe isn't working in the way we want. So again, that balanced perspective. The last use case I'll use that to me is once we're further down this journey, that I think a lot of people haven't necessarily, within Deloitte at least, thought about, is the competitive advantage. How far in the future can we see skills evolving, and how do we ready our workforce for those skills? And this is actually, I don't know if you remember this, one of the things we talked about when we were all getting to know each other about a year ago. And one of the questions I asked was, how far ahead could you see generative AI emerging on the scene before it really hit the scene in late 22, I think it was, or 23, late 23? And the answer that you guys gave me was probably about 6 months, which is, if you think about that as you're positioning your key assets and you're thinking about, I know where their skills are today, and there's 2 hops there from a learning and development perspective. I now know I can invest this piece of in this piece of the workforce for those 2 hops and make a bet that that's going to be some of the things that my clients need in the future. That's a game changer. It positions your human capital and your talent to be on the front end and informing the strategy and the sales engine and the marketing engine of your organization. I think that's absolutely possible with this technology.
Yeah, and a competitive differentiator. Now, what learnings are you taking from your prior life into this massive talent transformation at Deloitte. So, what advice would you give for folks that are maybe somewhat early in their journey?
Look, there's a lot of change that's swirling around us, and I think it can be very, very overwhelming. Very overwhelming. And I think bringing people on the journey in an incredibly transparent way can be daunting for leaders. But our experience, my experience, has been that is absolutely the right way to do it. We have to do that in Deloitte. I have about 2,500 clients. We're a partnership. We're not publicly traded. We're not centrally organized. We're decentrally organized by choice, which makes us powerful. But you can imagine bringing that 2,500 set of customers on a journey requires them to be way upstream in the setting of the strategy, part of the communication on a regular basis. They want to see their thumbprints on that strategy and see their perspectives on it day in, day out. And what that does is it then allows that to flow down, and you create that level of trust in an organization. And if you can get that right, you can take on a whole bunch of different transformations at once, and people see what their role is, where their fingerprints are on that. That's incredibly powerful. It's hard to get right, but we're doing it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Sean. Really
Thank you.
appreciate you joining us. Please join me in giving a round of applause to Sean.